You shifted through the trash like a wild raccoon, your dirty fingers scraping against the cold metal. The cold wind made you shiver. Living on the streets was a nightmare, especially this time of year. As a child, you always enjoyed autumn, but now it was like the prelude to the nightmare that was winter. At the moment you were in one of the more wealthy suburbs, shifting through the dumpster of a restaurant. They always threw away food that was still edible. You had a few plastic bags that you stuffed with things that wouldn't go bad for a while, while shoving anything that would go bad into your mouth. At least, that had been your plan. But as it turns out, well, yes, there were things like super fresh tomatoes in here. It also had a lot of mold. Probably just standing in this made you sick. Disgusted with yourself, you had quickly decided to only grab things that were still packaged. You had become homeless through a string of bad decisions. First was leaving your hometown. Second was your ex-boyfriend. Third was continuing the drug habit you had acquired thanks to your ex-boyfriend. The city held back no punches. If you had nothing, you simply had nothing. But hey, at least you sorted out that drug problem by being too poor to get any. You heard footsteps come closer, and your heart jumped. You quickly grabbed the container lid and threw it over yourself. You actually had slept in a container like this before, but this was just a little too moldy. Breathing as shallow as you could, you waited. The footsteps came closer, and a gruff voice called out, "Anyone out there?" Crap, 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 you thought. If you don't come out, I'll be mad. Your eyes began to tear up from fear and the putrid smell of the dumpster. Then you heard a crash from outside and the man screamed in fear. Then it was quiet for a moment. You were about to open the lid for a quick peek when you heard the man's voice again. "You goddamn raccoons," before audibly leaving. You were so relieved you almost fell back into a pile of rotten vegetables to sigh. You pushed open the lid and sneaked back out onto the streets, now smelling like sour milk. You'd vomit if you still had some pride in you left. Slowly you walked the city streets. In your panic, you had forgotten your bags and were now too ashamed to go back. So as you crept along the main streets of Japan's cities, you had a terrible feeling in your gut. Of course, you had just eaten a spoiled restaurant's food. You were so focused on not throwing up that you didn't even notice the black limousine pulling up next to you. Only after the guy driving called out to you did you look up. "Hey!" barked the guy. He was bald and had blue eyes. "You got a pimp?" You were covered in rags, smelling like a trash can. If he really thought you were a hooker, he must have really low standards. "Do I honestly look like I have a pimp, Daddy? To take care of me?" The guy turned around and said something through the back window, leading into the rest of the vehicle. Then the driver returned his attention to you. "Hop in." You blinked. "I just said I'm not." "I know what you said, so hop in," he interrupted. Oh God, this is how it ends. Being taken by some rich people for their own amusement. The door in the back of the car opened. For a moment, you stood there. "Kid, if you know what's good for you," you deadpanned. "Fine, let me rephrase." He cleared his throat. "If you knew what's good for you, you'd go in there." You gave up and walked towards the open door. Two arms immediately grabbing you and pulling you inside. You kicked and thrashed as you screamed for help, only to realize that no one was holding you down a minute later. Scared, you looked around yourself. The car's interior looked exactly like in one of those Hollywood movies about rich people losing everything. The right side, the one you were sitting in, was a long, comfy leather seat stretching from one end to the other. The floor was soft and carpeted, but the left side had bottles of alcohol and stacked glasses, completely filling it. Your fingers were twitching. The glasses alone could probably fetch a good price at a pawn shop. And slightly further down to the right of you sat a man in a two-piece suit. He was blonde, his piercing crimson eyes staring right through you. Wait. That couldn't be it. Could it? That was Bakugou Katsuki. In a world without quirks, the explosive blonde Bakugou Katsuki had to find a different outlet for his ego. Being a diligent student, and had become a highly skilled programmer and inventor. Just going on stage and watching people cheer him on whenever his company Dynamite released a new product was like the most intense drug to him. He truly earned his place among the top 25 most rich bachelors and bachelorettes in the world. He was right behind the famous movie star Izuku Deko Midoriya, who was known to perform his own stunts, and just above Ochako Uraraka, a girl born rich, dedicating her life to live as luxurious as possible. What was a man of his caliber doing here? Hell, what was a man of his caliber doing with you? He looked you up and down. Are you done with your little dance? You squeaked, trying to contain yourself. Of course you were nervous. Scared even. A man of his power and status could get away with anything. You should be happy, he said and smirked. Because you just won the lottery. Bakugou crossed his legs as your body convulsed. His eyes looked coldly down at you. Sorry, I'm gonna vomit. He leaned forward and grabbed a paper bag from somewhere you couldn't see. Shakily you accepted, as sour liquid and rancid chunks already made their way up your throat. You felt humiliated, vomiting right before one of the most important people on the planet. Once your gut was thoroughly emptied, you just managed to close the bag before falling on your side, heaving in pain. Bakugou took the bag from you and discarded it in the trash can. Your stomach made angry noises. So, are you listening? You nodded, but kept lying on this really comfy leather. Bakugou folded his hands in his lap before explaining. I'd like to treat you, little stray. You blinked. Any other person would right now get on their knees and thank him. And honestly, you'd do that too, if you didn't feel so drained. You didn't even have enough willpower in you left to make a sarcastic remark at him calling you a stray. The drive continued for about 5 minutes. Those were mostly spent with him asking very personal questions. How long have you been on the streets? A few years. How old are you? 24. Were only a few questions and answers we were giving. The first stop was an apartment he owned downtown. After a quick elevator ride where he stood a few feet apart from you, after all you were quite stinky, he led you into a decadent apartment. Its floors and walls were white and shiny. The blonde bragged about the designer, a former radio personality turned interior designer for the filthy rich called Hisashi Yamada. You followed Bakugou into his bathroom. There he threw a towel at you. Wash yourself. You smell disgusting. He left after placing a bundle of clothes on a beautifully clean sink. Judging by the shadow of his feet, he leaned against the door, patiently waiting. Quickly you discarded the dirty rags. It had been so long since the last time you had taken a shower. And watching as the liquid went down the drain, first being dark and then becoming translucent, it was almost mesmerizing. Why was this happening to you? Maybe you were just overdosing in some public bathroom right now. But even if you were, at least these would be our final memories, right? Better than nothing. With shaking hands, you reached for the alignment of shampoos and hair products. Can I use these? You shouted. He didn't answer, or if he did, you couldn't hear him, over the cascading water. Honestly, if this was a dream, he'd come in right now and shower with you. You chuckled to yourself, your legs quivering a little. You always were a little pervert. Giving in, you took one of the shampoo bottles. The text read Icy Hot by Shoto Todoroki. Of course, you would have preferred a feminine scent, but right now, all that mattered to you was getting clean. After you turned off the shower and began drying yourself with the towel he had given you, you stood closer to the door, listening in on the voice you were hearing. Hearing Bakugou speak. Yeah, I picked up another. I don't know. Yes. No, not happening. Was he on the phone? You continued drying yourself. From what I could see, she's a bit more on the cute side, yeah. You blushed. Shut up, you're a pervert, Eiichiro. You blinked. Of course a high society guy like him would know other high society guys. Eiichiro? As in Eiichiro Kirishima? You asked out loud without even wanting to. Bakugou laughed. She's listening in, he said, amused. Hey, you done in there? He barked at the closed door. Bakugou had given you a beautiful red dress, woman's underwear that only slightly looked sexy, and black tights. No additional accessories, makeup, or shoes. It was a little too big for you, but that was okay. You left the bathroom. Bakugou quickly said, "Talk to you later," before hanging up the phone. "You look good," he said and smirked, as he moved over to a very comfy-looking white couch. "Come on, sit," he ordered. Quickly you stepped over to the sofa. Your hair was still damp, and in the cool apartment living room, it felt refreshing. You sat opposite to him. Bakugou had his hands folded on his chest, as he began to speak. "I make an offer to one lucky winner once a year." "Lucky winner?" you asked. "I have a bet running with Deiko. We outdo each other when it comes to charitable acts. Of course, the nerd won in the end, but one thing I haven't stopped doing, because quite frankly, it's fun." He leaned backwards and crossed his legs as he relaxed. "I give people in your situation 2 offers. He looked you up and down. "Well, considering... Actually," then he smirked. "Scratch that. Make it 3. You gulped. "I'm not going to participate in some death game, right?" He blinked. "No?" he said, irritated. Then he huffed. I'm getting this question at least once from everyone. Where's this even coming from? You blushed and made yourself smaller. Not important. You stuttered. He shrugged. Well, as I was saying before, you interrupted me. You blushed hard. I make two, well, in your case, 3 offers. Number 1. You work for me. I'll find you a job in my company, give you a full glow-up, and provide 5 months' rent for a small apartment downtown. Don't worry. If you do a good job, I don't fire you. That apartment will practically pay for itself. And if needed, I will also provide any drug rehabilitations. You nodded, listening carefully. Offer 2. I give you right here, right now, 11 million yen. Your jaw dropped. 11 million yen was as much as $100,000. And put you back on the street. You can do with the money whatever you want. Get yourself out of this drag, or just buy drugs and eventually kill yourself. Your body shivered as you tried to suppress a squeal. But, he said after you were done overreacting, there's one more offer. I've only given it once before. You gulped. Offer 3 is a date. Your eyes widened. Quite frankly, it's the offer with the biggest potential reward. And just so you know, if that date goes down the drain, you will simply get your money and I have my leave. You blinked. So that's what the "she's cute" line meant. You combed through your damp hair. He was treating you like a pet, toying with you for his own amusement. Then Bakugou got up and proceeded to walk towards a cabinet filled with glasses and wine bottles. He poured himself a glass and slowly began to drink, as his eyes were unblinkingly set onto you. A cold shower washed over you. You could tell if he finished that glass before you answered, he would probably just throw you out. Or would he? That and many other thoughts were thrown around in your head. You said eventually, and he stopped drinking. I take the date, you stuttered. Painfully slowly, he returned to the sofa and set the glass on the table that separated you from him. Great choice. Bakugou treated you to a meal. It was one of the many restaurants owned by the famous chef Denki Kaminari. You ordered food that was light on your stomach as you still felt a little bit sick. Every second that passed, you forced yourself to remember those old movies that showed you the high society acting. Meanwhile, Bakugou continued to bombard you with questions, some related to your past, but some were curveballs. Like, if you were an animal, what would you be? To which you had chuckled as you tried to calm yourself. Before, your family had dropped you. Your father had given you questions like this as life advice, and had forced many basic answers into you. I'd be a duck, you said, trying to remember what exactly to say. Bakugou leaned back in his chair, an eyebrow raised, as he listened carefully. They're always calm, yet are hustling like crazy. You chuckled nervously. To get things done underneath. Your insides were on fire when he didn't answer immediately. But instantly you were relieved when he chuckled and just replied with, That's a hilarious answer. Did this mean this was the right one? Once you reached dessert, his questions had become more light-hearted. going from, "Do you like movies?" to, "What's your favorite anime?" It was pleasant, despite the tense situation. Well, admittedly, tense only for you. But eventually it did feel like it was like talking to a childhood friend that you haven't seen in a few months. And then he started talking about himself. "So, how did you get all this money?" You wanted to slap yourself. That was probably the most gold digger question ever. He, however, just chuckled. "I have an overblown ego from great looks, good grades. The only way I could satisfy it was by going on a grind. The more money I made, the more I felt at ease, like I was getting what I deserved." You bit your lips and followed up the question. "So, like, what's this, Izuku thing?" You were a fan of his after all. He laughed. "Ha! Me and that nerd go way back. To be honest, I wasn't the best of friends. In fact, I was his bully in middle school and high school. Strangely enough, it never scared him away. Weirdo. But even now, I feel like I have to outdo him. When he did charity, I did charity. You know, you get the gist." He smirked. "Besides, I make myself responsible for him doing his own stunts. I mean, when you're used to being thrashed around, might as well make that your job. Am I right?" Once the meal was over and the money had been paid, the food alone was probably more than you have ever made in a year, not to mention the expensive alcohol both of you had been consuming. Each sip made it a little more difficult not to barf again, but you needed to impress. Quickly you had found yourself back into his limousine. He was laughing, and so were you. Bakugou drove you back to his apartment, where he immediately fell into your arms, his lips tightly pressing onto yours. You groaned, but your upset stomach grumbled again. If you were to release all that precious food, you'd be mad at your body for ruining this. Was it slutty of you to throw yourself at him like this? Yeah, maybe. But anything beat being back on the street, even with 100K in cash. If you played your cards right, you'd get a generous, hot, and nice husband out of this. Thank God he liked your personality. Which was something that was getting more and more clear the further he pushed you up a small flight of stairs that led into his bedroom. There he remained for a moment. The entire time his lips haven't left yours once, and it became difficult to breathe. But his tongue was magical. This definitely wasn't his first time, but it wasn't yours either, even though you wished you could say the opposite. He was certainly the most gentle so far, however, as his tongue softly cradled yours. You groaned in pleasure, feeling his hands slide up your hips before pushing you onto his bed. Your toes curled up as you felt the softness of his mattress. Soon he lifted himself off of you as he unbuttoned his suit. The passionate love-making took a while, and had been deep in the night when he finally had fallen asleep. Through fevered blowing of your mouth, you managed to have him turn around in his sleep before you jumped out of bed. It was time. You could no longer hold it. Quickly you descended his stairs and ran into his bathroom. drinking that alcohol really had been the worst and best decision of your life.